And it's a pleasure to be here again. I was here a year ago, and I remember some of meeting y'all. It seemed like it was around Easter, so this must be the normal time you have it. But I want to start off by first thanking you all for what you do, because you make a difference in the Republican Party, and I know each and every one of you all work hard, and it makes a difference. And now, secondly, I want to talk about a few things tonight, but I got to ask you all two questions. And I've asked every group that I've talked to these two questions across the state. So I'm interested in seeing how you all reply. So you got to raise your hand. Now, how many of you all sitting here today are better off than your parents or your grandparents? Yeah, well, that's pretty good. Now, how many of y'all think your kids and your grandkids are going to be better off than you are today?
I do, because we're taking this country back.
Yes. Right. That's my point. But you know what? Everywhere I go, nobody raises their hand on this second question. It's terrible. It's shocking. And that is why I'm running for United States Senate, because we got to get rid of people like Clara McCaskill and President Obama and take our country back. You're exactly right. And I want you to think about this. Think about back when, how the world has changed. And when my parents were just kids, and that was back in 1931, the Empire State Building was built in 18 months with $5 million, and they came in 1 month ahead of schedule. Now, you know today how long it would take just to get the permits for a building like that? Probably 5 years. 5 years. You know that World War II was won in less than 5 years. So things have definitely changed, but it is not the American people. The American people, I believe, have the same strength and the same willpower they always have had. The willpower that made us that shining city upon the hill that Ronald Reagan talked about. So what is it that's changed? It's government. It's government that stifles our ingenuity. It taxes our wealth. It overregulates our economy. It restricts our rights. And it's more concerned about the fat content in our food than whether we're going to have enough domestic oil production to run our cars and our factories. And so what is the answer to this? Well, we know the answer isn't people like Senator Clara McCaskill and President Obama, because what do? You know what? They think they know best. They think government knows best. They think government can make better decisions about your life than you can. And think about it, whether it's education, whether it's health care, whether it's your business, your family, they think government knows best. And that's at the root of all the problems that we see in Washington today. Now, I've talked to people all over the state, and you know, it's a fun part of campaigning because you hear a lot of different stories. And, you know, I've heard stories about people. I was down at Turner Station down in Greene County not too long ago talking to a group of people. You know, and I asked them, what are you concerned with in Washington? This gentleman said, you know, I'm not worried about what they're doing in Washington. I'm too worried about how I'm going to make it through the next few months and feed my family, because this was a laid-off construction worker who didn't have a job. I talked to another young woman who had a small business. She's worried about how the federal regulators come in. She has a mining business, a little limestone quarry, 8 employees. Federal regulators come in and they, instead of saying, hey, we're here to help you make things better, to check it out, make sure everything's, you know, running safely, they say we have to find 2 violations. They come in with that attitude. And you know, each one of those violations probably costs $10,000 a piece. That's enough to put that little mining business out of operation. You know, you have, well, I'll tell you another story. You guys will appreciate this story. My father's 86 years old. I had to take him to the emergency room last Friday because he had what they thought might be a blood clot in his leg, and his foot was all swollen. So we sat over there in the emergency room. They had to run a ultrasound on his leg to make sure that it wasn't a blood clot because they thought it was cellulitis. But I asked them how much that was going to cost, and they didn't know. The doctor at the emergency room didn't know. I mean, and this is part of the problem. It wasn't his fault. It's just part of the problem with healthcare today, is that people don't know what the cost of anything is. And they went ahead and ran it, and thankfully he was okay. But these are all the kinds of different problems we're facing and need to be solved. And I'll tell you what, Washington isn't doing a very good job of solving them, are they? Washington is completely, in my opinion, disconnected from the rest of us. And they're irresponsible. And when you think and you look at what's gone on over the last couple years about what hasn't gotten done, we have a national debt of $16 trillion. Congress knew this was happening to us. And what did they do? They've done nothing. They've done nothing. They have continued to spend money that we do not have, and they have continued to raise the debt ceiling. They've continued to use continuing resolutions, these short-term little Band-Aids to get them through the next couple months, and just have completely ignored all the warning signs. Our AAA rating, we lose our AAA rating when Congress knew good and well that what they had to do to address the problems, but they chose not to do it. You know, when I was state treasurer, I took that AAA rating that the state of Missouri has very seriously. Why? Because it cost you money as a taxpayer if I let that thing go. If we let it go to a AA or something riskier. It mattered to me because it matters to you. But we don't have that kind of attitude in Washington anymore. Instead, we just have people who look at short-term Band-Aids to problems. You know, when you look at the fact that Claire McCaskill talks a good game about being concerned about fiscal discipline, and she's very good at talking, but in fact, what she does in Washington is the exact opposite of what she's talking about. What does she do? She has voted to increase spending. She's voted for debt ceilings, to raise the debt ceiling. She has voted time and time again for fiscal stimulus, for the bailout. She has voted to, in the face of 70% of Missourians being against the fact that they don't want an individual mandate placed on them by the government, in spite of that, she's voted twice for Obamacare. And hopefully the Supreme Court will have enough sense to interpret the Constitution the correct way and throw Obamacare out. But if they don't, I guarantee you I will be there to repeal Obamacare. Now, I can talk about all the problems, and I know everybody does that. And we know what they are. We're overregulated, we're overtaxed. The government spends money it doesn't have. We're not doing anything about it. We don't have a budget. The Senate hasn't voted on a budget for over 3 years. You know, I added up, 1,000 days, when we hit that 1,000 day without a budget, how much the salaries for those senators would cost. You know how much it was? $47 million. I think that's a good place to start cutting, but because they're not doing their job. It's irresponsible. Missouri can't operate like that and never has operated like that. We have to have a balanced budget. How can we seriously address an issue about spending money that we don't have when we have no budget? So we can't even believe anything that's coming out of Washington today, in my opinion, because they can't even get the very basics done. So I don't want to leave you with that, because too often we just lay out all the problems and then not give any of the solutions. And I do have solutions. In fact, I have what I call Sarah's 60-day solutions, which is an action plan, because I think voters have a right to know what you intend to do. And so for the first 60 days, this is what I intend to do. I may not get it done, but I'm going to fight as hard as I can to. And the way I looked at it is, that we have to increase the accountability in government, for one thing. We have, and that's at the very heart of everything. We have to restore economic growth and create an atmosphere where private enterprise can create jobs. And we also need to expand our personal freedom and personal responsibility. And so I have laid out a couple different ways I think we need to do that. One of them is, first, we need to, and I will support, a balanced budget amendment to the United States Constitution. But we also need to have a cap on the size and growth of government to go along with that. Because a balanced budget in itself isn't enough. Because the Democrats will just raise your taxes to pay for it. So we need to be sure and limit that size of government, just like we have here in Missouri. And it's called the Hancock Amendment here. You know, state government cannot grow faster than your own growth in personal income. So it can't be bigger than what, as a percentage, than what you are growing yourself individually. So that's one thing we need to do. I think we need to completely get rid of the tax system we have and put a new one in place that moves toward a fairer, flatter tax. Because what do we have? We have 47% of the people who aren't paying anything in taxes on one side, and then we have a lot of big business and corporations who can afford to hire lobbyists and contribute a lot of money to people in Washington and get their special interest deal and their special definitions in the tax code. They end up paying nothing. You guys end up paying all of it. And we need to change that system and make it simpler. And we can do that. Broaden the base, close a lot of those loopholes, lower the rate. And the other thing that would do is it would get economic growth in this country going just like that. I mean, once Washington does something like that to encourage growth, so that you know that you're going to get to keep more of your own income for not 1 year and not 2 years, but 10 years down the road. So you can plan and actually change your behavior and expand by creating more jobs if you're a small business owner. Right now, that's not happening for some of those reasons. The other reasons that is not happening is because there's too much uncertainty in the economy. And small businesses face it every day. They don't know how much, because of a huge deficit, and Claire McCaskill talking about raising taxes, they don't know how much taxes they're going to have to pay. They think they will, so you hang on to your money and you don't spend it. The regulatory environment also contributes to that uncertainty. So what do we do about that? I believe that we need a moratorium on all rules and regulations and make Congress go in and actually do something. Review every single rule and regulation and make sure that it is consistent with the statute. Is it necessary? Does it do anything? Is it just a silly paperwork violation or rule that could be thrown out? I hear more complaints about this than anything on the campaign trail. And I'm sure each one of you all has your own stories to tell about regulatory overreach by the federal government. And we can change that. But we've got to have people in Washington who are willing to stand up and do something. Not just vote the right way, but actually take the initiative and do something. And anticipate some of these problems that are going to come your way and try to stop them before they get there. So that leads me to my last point, which is to demand government accountability. Because unless we change the way Washington does business, we're going to get the same outcome, no matter what problem it is that we're dealing with. And so how do we do that? Well, I think there's a couple ways we can do it. One of the ways that I would like to pursue, and I will, is to eliminate congressional pensions and to pursue term limits. Now, I think if you eliminated congressional pensions, you probably wouldn't need term limits. I will self-term limit 2 years, no more. I'll also pursue a constitutional amendment to make sure that we can at least vote on term limits in this country. But the problem with Washington is that they're so disconnected from the rest of us because they are insulated. They live in their own world. They have perks that none of the rest of us have. They have cushy pensions. They have insurance that they don't have to worry about like we have to worry about. They aren't even treated the same under the law in a lot of cases. They exempt themselves. For example, the insider trading that we've seen in the last couple months, where they did not get in trouble. They were exempt from something that you would have been convicted of and gone to jail. So we have to change the way Washington does business. And we have to have people with guts and willing to do that, because that's the status quo. That's what they like. Republicans and Democrats like that. They don't want to change it. Not all of them, but a lot of them. The reason that I think I am well qualified for this is because I have a record of fighting and standing up for what I believe in. And I would invite you to look at my record and the people I'm running against and compare, because I'm proud of it. And I'll tell you, I've never been afraid to fight for what I believe in. I've never backed down from a fight. There's been several issues. You will remember when I was in the state Senate, I fought to make sure that your taxpayer dollars didn't go to fund a baseball stadium in St. Louis. I filibustered it. It didn't happen. Because your taxpayers are important to me. Your tax dollars. I respect your tax dollars. Something that's lost on most people in Washington. You know, when legislators wanted to use state funds for an ethanol plant, I said it was wrong, because if you're a legislator, that's a conflict of interest. And I had that kind of policy as state treasurer. And the legislature overrode that and passed legislation in the middle of the night to say it was okay to do that. Well, I don't think that's right. These are the kind of things that we need to fight and stand up against. When I was state treasurer, I created the first terror-free fund in the country, in spite of the fact that people said we're more worried about their bottom line and about the dollar, even though we were putting taxpayer dollars into companies that were doing business with our enemies, like Iran. And I said, no, that's wrong. We can't do that. And divested our state pension fund and created the first terror-free fund in the country. And now about 23 other states have adopted that same policy. And 6 years later, we're looking at Iran. Now, finally, the federal government has adopted some of those same economic sanctions. But I did it 6 years ago. So like I said, look at my record. You'll find out that I like to shake things up. And that's the kind of people that we need in Washington, D.C. Because if we don't, we're going to just get the same outcome. I want to close by telling you a little story that my father-in-law told me. It was some advice, actually, that he gave me when I was elected to the state Senate back in 1998. And you got to know my father-in-law. His name was Dorman. He grew up down on the Current River. He went to school in a little one-room schoolhouse. He was one of 11 children to go to college, University of Missouri. First one in his family. Went on to law school, and he became a judge. And he actually served as a chairman of the Republican Party for a brief period of time, because he got ousted because he was too conservative. But he was full of good old Ozark common sense, and he gave me some good advice when I got elected to the state Senate. He said, Sarah, when you go to Jeff City, be sure and stand up and fight for what you believe in when you get the chance. Because here's what will happen to you. On the first hard vote, there'll be a group of people that'll come to you, and they're going to say, you know, we really need you to vote with us on this one. We really need you on this one. So you can live to fight another day, another battle. And those people will be your big contributors, they'll be special interest groups. They'll be members of your own party, and they will come to you time and time again, and they'll say, hey, we really need you on this bit so you can live to fight another battle. And then one day you wake up and you realize that all the battles that you went to fight have passed you by because you didn't stand up and fight for what you believe in. And that's exactly what's happening in Washington, D.C. today, and I won't allow it to happen. I will always stand up for the people of this state and put your interests first over party, over re-election, over special interests, over everything, because that's what I'm sent there to do, and that's what I believe in. And if we're going to restore freedom to this country, then we need people like that in the United States Senate. And I'll just say this. Don't you know there wasn't a group of people that came to those 56 signers of the Declaration of Independence, and that group probably said to them, you guys really want to put your name on that document? You really want to do that? Why don't you wait and do it another day, another year, maybe next year? You know, you're risking your children's lives. You're risking your own life, your livelihood. It's treason. You really want to do that? And thank goodness, thank God, really, that they had the courage and the faith and the vision for this country, that they weren't afraid to do that. They did it. Now we owe it to them to make sure that we preserve the country that they gave us. And that's what I intend to do. I appreciate very much the chance to talk to you tonight. I would love to have your vote. You can go to sarahsteelman.com and find out more information about me. And thank you all so very much for letting me be here tonight.